I had just moved into my new house and I was excited to explore every inch of it. As I was wandering around, I found a door that led to the basement. It was dark and cold, and I could hear strange noises coming from the bottom of the stairs. I turned on the light and saw that the basement was empty except for a table with a game board on it. It was an old board game that I had never seen before, but it looked intriguing. The board was divided into squares, and there were instructions on how to play the game. I read the instructions and realized that it was a game of chance. I was supposed to roll a die and move my game piece around the board, trying to reach the end before my opponent. The strange thing was that there was no opponent. The instructions said that I was playing against the game itself. I decided to give it a try, and I rolled the die. I moved my game piece and waited to see what would happen. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out. I heard a creaking sound, like something was moving around in the darkness. I tried to turn on the light, but it wouldn't work. I was stuck in the basement, alone in the dark. Then, I heard a voice. "Hello," it said. "I'm your opponent." I jumped back in fear. I couldn't see anyone, but I could hear the voice coming from all around me. I didn't expect anyone to play this game, the voice continued. "But since you're here, let's see if you can beat me." I was terrified, but I didn't want to lose the game. I rolled the die again and moved my game piece. As I did, I heard more strange noises coming from the darkness. I started to feel like something was watching me. I could feel eyes on me, even though I couldn't see anything. The voice kept taunting me, telling me that I was going to lose. I rolled the die again, but this time it came up with a snake symbol. According to the instructions, that meant I had to move my game piece back to the beginning. I felt a cold breath on my neck, and I knew that something was behind me. I turned around, but I still couldn't see anything. "I'm getting closer," the voice said. "You're not going to win." I was shaking with fear. I wanted to leave the basement and never come back, but I couldn't. I was trapped in the game. I rolled the die again and moved my game piece. This time, I heard a scream. It sounded like it was coming from inside the game board. The lights flickered back on, and I saw that my game piece was now halfway across the board. I had made progress, but I still had a long way to go. I rolled the die again and moved my game piece. The voice laughed. "You're never going to beat me," it said. "You're stuck here forever." I rolled the die again, but this time it shattered into a million pieces. I felt something grab me from behind, and I was pulled into the game board. I was now inside the game, surrounded by darkness. The voice was still taunting me, but now it was louder. "Welcome to my world," it said. "You're never getting out." I was trapped in the game, and I knew that I would never escape. The basement game had claimed another victim. I volunteered for a sleep experiment to earn some extra cash. It seemed simple enough, just spend a few nights in a laboratory, hooked up to some machines, and get paid a good amount of money. The lab was in an old building on the outskirts of town, and I was the only participant. The first night was uneventful. I slept fairly well, although the machines attached to me made me feel a bit uncomfortable. However, on the second night, things started to get strange. I woke up in the middle of the night feeling like I was being watched. I looked around the dimly lit room, but I didn't see anyone. I shrugged it off and went back to sleep. The next morning, the researchers asked me about my dreams. I told them I didn't remember having any, which was odd because I usually had vivid dreams. They didn't seem too concerned and went about their business. That night, the feeling of being watched was even stronger. I woke up to see a shadowy figure standing at the foot of my bed. I rubbed my eyes and looked again, but the figure was gone. I tried to calm myself down, but I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. The following morning, the researchers asked me again about my dreams, but this time they seemed more interested. I told them about the shadowy figure, and they made a note of it. I started to feel like something was off about the experiment, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. That night, things got even weirder. I woke up to the sound of whispering in my ear. It was a language I couldn't understand, and it sounded like it was coming from right next to me. I sat up in bed, but there was no one there. The whispering stopped, and I was left alone in the dark. The next morning, I was exhausted. I barely slept all night, and the whispering had left me shaken. The researchers were concerned about my lack of sleep and decided to end the experiment early. They unhooked me from the machines and gave me my payment. As I was leaving the building, I heard a voice whisper in my ear again. This time, it was clear and unmistakable. It said, "Don't come back." I turned around, but there was no one there. I went home and tried to put the experience behind me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me. That night, I had a vivid dream about the shadowy figure. It was standing in front of me, its eyes glowing in the dark. It reached out and touched my forehead, and I woke up with a start. The next morning, I did some research on the sleep experiment. I found out that the laboratory had a history of conducting experiments on sleep deprivation, and that some of the participants had suffered from hallucinations and other psychological problems. That's when it hit me, the shadowy figure, the whispering, and the feeling of being watched. It was all a result of sleep deprivation. The lab had pushed me to the brink of exhaustion, and my mind had started playing tricks on me. I tried to put the experience behind me, but the memory of the shadowy figure and the whispering stayed with me. I couldn't sleep properly for weeks, and I started to feel like I was being watched again. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me, even though I knew it was all in my head. Years later, I still have nightmares about the sleep experiment. I learned the hard way that there are some things that are just not worth the money. I had always been fascinated by abandoned buildings and the stories they held. So when I heard about the old asylum on the outskirts of town, I knew I had to explore it. Despite the rumors of it being haunted, I couldn't resist the urge to see what secrets it held. As I approached the old, dilapidated building, I felt a chill run down my spine. The air was heavy with an eerie silence that seemed to suffocate me. I pushed open the rusty gate and walked towards the entrance. The door creaked as I pushed it open, and the musty smell of the abandoned building filled my nostrils. As I walked through the corridors, I felt a sense of dread wash over me. The walls were peeling, and the floorboards creaked under my feet. The asylum was clearly abandoned, yet I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was being watched. As I continued to explore, I heard a faint whisper. It was so soft that I couldn't make out what was being said. But the whispering continued, and it seemed to be getting louder. I followed the sound, and it led me to a door that was slightly ajar. I hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open. The room was empty, except for a chair in the corner. As I approached the chair, I noticed a piece of paper on the seat. I picked it up and read the words scrawled on it. "You shouldn't be here. Get out while you still can." I felt a wave of fear wash over me as I realized that I wasn't alone in the asylum. I quickly made my way towards the exit, but the door was locked. Panic set in as I realized that I was trapped. As I searched for another way out, the whispering continued. It was louder now, and it seemed to be coming from all around me. I started to run, but the asylum seemed to be endless. The walls kept changing, and the doors seemed to lead to nowhere. Finally, I stumbled upon a room that looked different from the others. The walls were covered in strange markings, and the air was thick with an otherworldly energy. In the center of the room was a circle of candles, and in the middle of the circle was a figure. I couldn't make out the face, but I could tell that it was staring at me. The whispering had stopped, and the silence was deafening. I took a step closer, and the figure spoke. "Welcome to your worst nightmare," it said. I tried to run, but my feet were glued to the ground. The figure stood up, and I could see that it was not human. Its eyes glowed red, and its skin was pale and leathery. It started to approach me, and I could feel its cold breath on my neck. I closed my eyes, waiting for the worst to happen. But when I opened them again, I was back at the entrance of the asylum. The door was open, and the sun was shining outside. I stumbled out of the asylum, feeling dizzy and confused. I looked back at the building, but it seemed to have disappeared. There was nothing there except for an empty field. I knew that I had experienced something that was beyond explanation. The old asylum held secrets that were better left undiscovered. And I knew that I would never forget the terror that I had felt inside its walls.